Welcome, everyone. It's another wonderful Wednesday with your host and hostess, or your hostess and hostess. I think we can say that now. Don Anderson here and Leslie Snyder over there. How you doing,
Hello.
Leslie?
Hello. I'm good. I'm good.
All right, all right. Well, we're here once again with another wonderful Wednesday and a lot of wonderful stuff to talk about because there's never a dull moment since the election of this administration. And so we thought we'd kick it off with a little discussion around, I think, first of all, the whole data center controversy, which seems to have kind of grown like so more people. Basically, the expansion of data centers in the United States. So let me stop and over to you, Leslie, if you want to like shed some more light, your thoughts on that. And of course, since I'm a dad, I have an opinion on everything, and
You're
happy
gonna
to
win.
share it too.
Well, so AI, AI is just everywhere, and we need data centers. Supposedly, we need data centers in order to more and more and more data centers in order to make them work. Um, and it is continuing to be an issue, and it is a growing issue. Constituents do not want AI data centers in their backyard. It's not just a matter of NIMBY. I don't want this or I don't want a Walmart or I want this or that. I mean, the issues are real, and so I just read something even this week where they were saying that out on the campaign trail, that is one of the number one issues is how do we and it's an issue that both sides agree on. So all of our politicians are going to need to contend with this. So really, like the reason why people oppose them are they're afraid that it's going to make their electric bills higher because the AI data centers are going to be sucking up all the electricity, which is going to make rates higher, for residences and businesses. It's also going to suck up all the water. And there's noise and pollution. There's weak local payoff. So it's not like you're opening up a Costco or an Amazon warehouse where you're going to be employing a lot of people. You're going to be building on the local economy. AI data centers have few staff, and it's just sitting there running machinery. So there's not a whole lot of payoff. There's not employment being generated. There's no taxes being generated necessarily from there's no people going to restaurants and things like that. So that's a big issue. And then of course there's land use rights. People just don't want to look out and see a 3 football field size data center in their community. And so one of the conversations that has come up is, well, if people don't want it in their towns or even on the outskirts of their towns, then what about putting it offshore? So I don't know if you've heard people talk about that. Well, let's just build a data center in the middle of the ocean. We're drilling oil in the middle of the ocean. Why not have a data center? But even that is also proving to be a problem. Not that it is a problem in and of itself necessarily, but that all it does is remove accountability for an existing problem. It doesn't address the problem. You're still going to be sucking up water. You're going to be expelling, heat. Of course, what's that going to do to the ocean, floor? We already have all this concern about coral reefs and fish dying and migratory patterns of this and that being interrupted, and none of that is being addressed. It's just pushing the issue from here to somewhere offshore where it would probably even grow exponentially. Nobody's there watching it, right? Problems grow in the dark, and they're
Yeah.
going to have this whole. And then, of course, there's also the issue of who has what's the word I'm looking for? Who has legal jurisdiction over these data centers? Is it the country that where the owners are affiliated? Do we have some sort of ocean treaties? Is it, what I mean? Like it's just not defined. So lots and lots of problems still, but Trump of course keeps pushing because he doesn't want China to accelerate. He really wants us to be, leading the way. On a personal note, I was on a cruise a couple weeks ago, and one of the gentlemen that I was with works in tech and works in AI now, and we were talking about how a lot of these AI machines, are one of the big fears is that they're going to start to actually develop their own sense of what do you call it, like independent actions, and what do you call that, like autonomous or something, where they can start to actually determine what they do and what they stop doing. And because of course they have
Space Odyssey 2000, was
yeah,
it Dave?
yeah. And
Right.
then like basically every model out there, whether it's the Chat GPT's model, or it's Anthropic, or they've all gotten away. They've all gotten away from the creators. So this gentleman that I was with was saying that in his opinion, in his AI expert opinion, these massive number of data centers are actually technically not even necessary. If you look at what the other countries are building, it's significantly less. It's like, I'm just going to throw some numbers out, but like China has like 450 and Korea has like 239, and America wants to build like 4,162, right? Those are fake numbers, but the disparity in the amounts is significant. America is pushing for so many more data centers than all of these other countries. And this gentleman was saying that the reason is not that it is needed for all these data centers, but the AI itself is convincing people that they need to build data centers so that they can just be more and more and more powerful. And I thought, oh my God, here we go. Here we go.
Mm-hmm. So I'm definitely not claiming to be an expert on this one, right? I've intentionally kind of kept my head in the dark on this stuff for a long time because there was just so many other issues to talk about. Why talk about this one? So my high level thought on this, and I'm persuadable away from this position because it's a new enough one, but my gut is that this is less a question of whether we're going to do it or not, because I think we have to do it. Is a question of how we do it. It's kind of like nuclear energy. When nuclear came along, there was the same sorts of reaction to it. A lot of fear, not in my backyard. Oh my God, it's gonna be radiation. This is horrible. Blah. So, so on the other hand, for certain, we don't want our adversaries to get ahead of us on this. Going back to kind of the space race with the Soviet Union, same kind of a thing. So I think one of the big problems with this has been the way that this has been rolled out. These companies have been really secretive, and they got their reasons for doing it. It's kind of like when Disneyland went into Florida, they weren't advertising they were going to Florida because otherwise a bunch of developers would bought the land and they wouldn't have been able to do their thing. I think the same thing is happening here. So in order to build these things, if you tell people, you can imagine what that's going to do to the real estate prices and how the reaction will be to that. So you're acting in what would be a good business interest to do it, but it comes across as hiding it, which you are from those communities, what's coming their way. And who could blame them? Their complaints are legit. I mean, noise, if there is noise, I mean, obviously that's legit. The legit concern about is not going to drive employment like other industries. Yep, that's true. You're not going to have zillions of people like hired there like that. The water concern about them using water, yes, and no to a certain extent, because I've seen other things where there's other industries that use a lot more water than this would use, but it will use water for sure. Utility prices, right? So, but I think my gut tells me that these are all things that are not saying don't do it. What they are saying is like, well, let's figure out a way to do it so it doesn't, so it mitigates those things. So, can we put these things far enough away or situate them such that we can reduce the noise? Can we do this in a way that they're responsible for the utility rates don't go up, or they're paying for it, not the citizens in the area? Can they be done in such a way that that they're taxed so that the communities around it really benefit from it? See, I think all of those things are workable. I didn't say perfect solution, but think about like nuclear, right? We know that nuclear is, and what we've done for the last 50 years, by the way, is just gotten rid of it, which I think was a gigantic mistake. You look at a country like France has like 80 nuclear reactors, haven't had an issue, right? So clearly there's ways to build these things and construct them in such a way that they're safe. I think is probably what we'll wind up with here, Because the one thing we can't afford is for our adversaries to wind up with a leg up in this thing. That's what it looks like to me, not being an expert, right? Um, but we can't afford to let a technology that's this big, we can't be at the mercy of China, Russia, or anyone else with regard to that. So that's, as a complete layperson, right? That's what it looks like to me. And the public needs to be more involved in that. You can't just roll something in somebody's neighborhood and say, "Hey, guess what, fellas? There's a plant across the street. Deal with it." And I think that has caused people a lot of grief. Right? And the public hasn't had a chance to digest any of this. It's just all of a sudden it's here, and people are like, "What the? You know what?" So that's my gut.
Well, I think that's kind of the common understanding is that, it's coming, embrace it. Of course, we don't want our enemies to be ahead of us, but we have to. But there also seems to be um, a lot of uncertainty about, well, what is actually needed in order for us to be ahead of the game, and that doesn't seem to be clearly spelled out. So that's why they're looking to build data centers all over the place, and meanwhile residents, because they don't have any protections in place, they're ruining communities.
Right.
um, and so they're just going from community to community,
Mhm.
and eventually I just, first of all, when you talk about tax incentives, this could very easily be considered something for the betterment of humanity. Like, I can see our government saying that. And so any sort of inconvenience that communities experience is just taking it for the team. Just like COVID, we're all in it together. I'm sorry that your business went under. I'm sorry that your kid is now 2 years behind in school. I'm sorry that your baby cannot recognize facial expressions on strangers, because they didn't see people except for behind a mask, for 2 years. I'm sorry this, I'm sorry that. That's the pattern that our government has revealed to us that they're comfortable playing. And I think it's very legitimate to be concerned about that
Well,
regarding the data centers.
100%. I mean, and that's one of the things when you're operating in a democracy, you have to be able to you have to engage in a dialogue with the citizens. Otherwise, you wind up with like massive blowback, and deserved blowback too. And I think this is just part of that process. One of the, hate to say it, one of the advantages of dictatorship is you don't have to worry about any of this stuff. It's like too bad, so sad. When China built that dam and they flooded out, like, I think they caused a displacement of something like 50 million people and wiped out ancient civilizations, whatever, now like underwater. It's like tough noogies, right? And here we don't do that, which is globally a strategic disadvantage in the short term. Obviously, because we want the better system, is a huge advantage culturally as a result of the problem.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, anyway, it's something that I'm going to continue. It's something that I'm going to.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I agree with you 100%. That's got to be they need to like pull the curtain back more. They need to figure out a way to be more transparent, right, about the and then be willing to hear people's concerns. And okay, I'm not going to build this power line over your house, right? Sort
Well,
of, right?
yeah, I'm not going to actually build a data center within 50 miles from your community. I mean, how about that? I
Yeah,
don't want to hear the vibration, or feel the vibration. Is it going to break my pool, in 10 years? I don't want to be walking around, wondering about what's coming out of that, is whatever's coming out of that data center, like, people are afraid of power lines. People are afraid of, cell phone towers. We're finding out all of this stuff. The public finds out about all these risks so much later.
yeah.
And yeah, so anyway, people are engaged. I'm glad people are engaged. This is the democratic process. So,
Mhm.
you know, we'll see how politicians
For,
respond.
for fly, and that's good.
Yeah. I was just gonna say I'm having a hard time with you're kind of coming in and out. So if I'm late to respond, that's why, because
Okay.
I'm looking at you 10 seconds ago.
Yeah, I don't know why it's because it looks normal here, but anyway, I'm used to being
Well,
abnormal. So
I was gonna say that's the first step is admitting that there might be a problem.
right.
So
Okay. All right. I got that. Let's see. What else did we have? Oh, I thought the measles outbreak back in, I want to say Pennsylvania. In fact, I'm sure it was Pennsylvania. Would be a worthwhile discussion as well, because I think there's so many interesting nuances to this. So, bottom line, if I recall, New York Times, one of the big papers back east, reported that there was two people that died who had measles. Now, notice I didn't say they died of measles; they died with measles. Now, even if they died of measles, I don't think that would really mitigate what I'm about to say about this. So, obviously, what's the task? The medical years. It's all already gaslighting episode. That's the when you got to step back and look at. Okay, we need more information than just a couple people died who had measles, right? So, like for one thing, how old were they? What other pre-existing conditions did they have? What kind of like condition were they in? Before we go running around trying to shut it, like you were saying a minute ago, throw a mask on everybody, close down every school, shut down everything, and then mandate that 100% of the population get shot with a vaccine. That really, as we're learning more and more, a lot of these vaccines have never been proven to be safe and efficacious either at the end of the day. So you could ask yourself that question. Let's say there was a real legit, let's say it was like 5,000 measles cases, right? We'll just say that. That doesn't necessarily mean ergo everybody go get a shot, because you got to tell me, well, what's the efficacy and safety of the vaccine in terms of preventing measles? I haven't heard any of that. We've been shot with this stuff ever since we were little kids, with everyone just assuming that it's legit, like tetanus. If you go back and look at the tetanus shot, we all got the tetanus shot, right? Well, what's the probability that you're going to get tetanus, and then what's the likelihood you're going to have an adverse impact from having tetanus? Minuscule. Oh, you might step on the nail and single doesn't happen. Tetanus pre-existing, right? So these are the discussions that need to be had, and the media is great at creating panic without providing the rest of the story. And we just experienced that for the last like 6 years. So let me stop
so
there.
are you so are you saying that the story is that two people died of measles? Is that the whole story?
The story is, I'm going to see if I can't find it. Two people died who had measles.
Who had measles? Right. Okay. Two.
Right.
Two people.
Right, two. Let me see if I can't find this. Two deaths. CNN reported two unvaccinated. This is the thing. They made sure and pointed this out. Two people who were unvaccinated. In other words, they didn't have measles shots. Two people in Pennsylvania, the first measles-related deaths in the U.S. this year. Measles-related, by the way, right? So not died of measles, but measles-related. So we don't know anything. Were they like 95 years old, had 5 pre-existing conditions?
Right.
Were they have terminal cancer and caught measles at the end? Were they immunocompromised or a bunch of other stuff? We don't know anything. So until you tell us the rest of the story, we don't know anything.
Yeah, I mean, is it a slow news day? I mean, who reports on 2 measles deaths? That just seems. How many bee stings, right? Like how many people, had an ingrown toenail that got infected? I don't. That doesn't really tell me anything.
What do you call it? Call it conspiracy on you. But who would be incentivized? What would be the incentive to do that?
Of course.
Well, if you make vaccines, hey, this is an opportunity for some sales. And remember, vaccine sales are down from what they used to be. Surprise, because of what's happened the last 6 years. They've destroyed their credibility around vaccines of any kind, not just to mention the COVID vaccines. And so what a great way to get people to go back and get vaccines again. Maybe you can spook everybody into getting. No, by the way, I saw this. I think something like, I think 92% of the population in Pennsylvania has had the measles vaccine. What they're saying is you need to have 95% to ensure, quote unquote, herd immunity.
Are these measles sufferers Amish, or I mean, who are these people?
Don't know.
Okay, so we don't have any information. Okay, so
Right.
so like, it almost sounds like that other story was it the Wall Street Journal. Somebody wrote a story last week in defense of Fauci, and basically trying to point out that despite his ridiculous diary entries, which of course he made on his government computer and then emailed to himself, despite him revealing his true personality and his ego and his just anyway, this article came out in defense of Fauci, and that well, he was just doing the best that he could and blah blah blah, and targeting Republicans and conservatives for and the Republican senators for questioning him and being frustrated by him. And so it's almost like something that you might want to publicize if you were trying to reignite confidence in the public health institutions and provide a little bit more fuel to this argument that these career bureaucrats, Fauci and some of these other folks, are really just trying to help us, and we've picked them out and we've created them out to be monsters through nothing that they've caused, right? And so I could see that this would kind of feed that. Look at what happens when we start lowering the tolerance, I guess you could say, or lowering the requirements on vaccinations. Our public health institutions and our public health in general is jeopardized. So yes, vaccines, of course, pharma companies will benefit, but I could see it being a political argument as well.
The remainder of the population, they're going to have to do a lot better than they did last time around. I think their credibility is just shot. I mean, there's a reason why people are getting vaccines at a lot lesser rate than they did before, because they feel like they've been snowed, and they were. And as you start digging into, and they report this in the national press, a lot of the vaccine, first of all, obviously there were too many vaccines being given relative to what we got when we were kids. And then you look at the data, and they poo-pooed the people who were talking about autism rates over the last 30 years going through the roof, and correlating it to possibly being related to all of these vaccines. And those people got pilloried for the last 30 years. And now, when the proper response should have been, that's interesting. This is what science usually would do. That is an interesting correlation. Let's go do the research and then see if there is a correlation, rather than, oh, you're just stupid, that's just conspiracy, blah, blah, blah. How science oriented is that? So they destroyed themselves. And then you look at the rates of autism, for example, and autism is just one of the things, through the roof in the last 30 years. What else explains it? I'm not saying it's necessarily the only thing. For example, the food has changed radically also in that same time period. I mean, the amount of processed carbs and sugars that we take in relative to when we were kids has obviously changed. But some combination of that has led to, autism was unheard of. And we talked about this. Unheard of when we were kids. I didn't know anybody. Obese kids. I didn't know any fat kids, right?
Yeah.
And now it's it's so bad in the Army that I think they added on a couple of extra weeks. They have to get in shape they had to go to training for a couple of weeks extra just so they can handle the beginning of training. So,
well, I know that they have deferred, I'm just going to call it deferred entrance to the military. There were so many out of shape people that were trying to get into the military that they will admit you, but only if you go to this little training camp.
Right.
And I don't think it's just 3 weeks. I think it might actually be longer than that. And You have to go. I mean, this is legitimately what the military was doing. I'll look it up.
Right.
But I know from military officials that there was
Mhm.
just all these fat, out of shape people, young
Yeah.
people trying to get in, and they would just put them through like a fat camp,
Right.
you know, and have to learn how to do push-ups. And
Yeah.
I mean, I don't think the requirements were particularly high.
Yeah.
But yeah, that was going on.
Well, yeah. Well, back in the day, any kid graduating from high school was in good enough shape to. Remember, they used to have the JFK fitness standards in the schools, and you had to be able to climb the pegs, climb the rope, do so many push-ups, sit-ups, squat thrusts, and everybody did them. Girls, boys, everybody did them. So you could walk in and be capable of. Yeah, you're going to be sore the first 2 weeks, but it wasn't like insurmountable. I
Yeah.
mean, you now we got kids that look at a flight of stairs and start looking for the elevator.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, but I think it's my guess is it's a combination of all of that. And clearly, as you start looking at these vaccines, and I should do a little research on this and do this for the next show. Most of these things were never tested for efficacy and safety. But they might have neither one, but definitely not safety. They just rushed them out of the market. And any product that comes to the market, and there's no way that you can sue, by the way, is a product
Yeah.
you should probably not take anyway. If that company doesn't
Yeah.
have enough confidence that their product's not going to harm you,
Yeah.
I mean, that is a gigantic red flag. Now, the minute they get rid of that liability thing, I'm completely good with your vaccines, right? I'm not saying I take it, but yeah, I'm completely good with it. But as long as you have what do you call it? No liability. I'm going to give my kid a shot that kills him, and you're not going to be liable. Are you crazy? Um,
Right.
and then one last thing, and I'll shut up on this topic. You go to, and I used to be in medical sales, right? So you get a drug, and there's a package insert that everybody, very few people do, but every drug has a package insert. And you can get home, you can pull it up. Nowadays, you can look it up on the internet. You can read everything about that product, all the studies that were done for it. If you really want to go blind from boredom, I'm the guy who likes that stuff though. But you can
Mhm.
read that stuff. When was the last time you saw a package insert for a vaccine? I don't remember them ever handing you something, or saying, "Here's the document about how this thing was." You just take it and you assume that it's the only thing I could think of in medicine where that happened. Um,
Well, there's a doctor on Instagram that I follow, where he will every week he'll go through a vaccine or a medication, and he will pull out the insert, and he'll just literally go through it
mhm,
and talk about, okay, well, this is what this means, this is what that means, and these are all the warnings.
mhm,
There's a black box warning on this. Are you even aware of it?
mhm,
And it's all, it's like the COVID vaccine, the flu vaccine, the measles vaccine, the this, the that, the shingles vaccine. It's all the stuff. But yeah, every week he goes through it, and I'll put his name in the. But anyway,
yeah,
it,
yeah. No, that is clearly something amiss with that. And all I'm saying is get rid of it. You could make us all have a lot more belief in you if you just raise that ability to be sued thing. Um,
oh yeah,
but they're not doing it. Nobody's even talking about doing it. So until you
yeah,
do that, I don't want to hear about your vaccines.
yeah, yeah. I'm trying to look up. There was a recent announcement by Linda McMahon. She's Department of
Epidemic-
Education,
Okay.
and you got me thinking because you were talking about hiding things, and I read Linda McMahon came out, I think it was this week, and was talking about how teachers unions and how they've been protecting predators,
Mhm.
and that a couple of years ago, I think it was Bush. Was it
Mhm.
Bush who, I don't know if it was Bush one or Bush two, who published a report talking about this, and asking for more accountability from the teachers unions.
Mhm.
And all they've done is continue to cover it up. But in the report, and I'm looking it up right now, but in the report they were comparing it to the Catholic priest scandals, and they were saying that this issue, this problem, was like 100 times worse
Mhm.
than the priest issue. And that blew up, and I mean, it took a long time, but it finally blew up, and everybody was horrified, and there's been accountability. But in California in particular, even California will not share disciplinary records of teachers
Yeah.
from district to district,
Mhm.
even within California. So you can have somebody who was fired for inappropriate behavior, molesting a student, something that didn't go to a trial, right? But they were fired for this, and they will get hired in another district because disciplinary records can't be shared.
Right, right. And yeah, that's a great analogy to the Catholic priest scandal, because this affects like what 10,000 times more people than the Catholic priest would ever have exposure to. We're talking everybody sends their kid to public, or a huge percentage anyway, right? So if you let that run wild, then you're going to be in a lot of trouble. And I'll tell you, and I've got some pretty personal experience with that one. Me personally, but I'll give you like a couple of stories. So my kids were homeschooled. And so homeschooled, how much impact do you have from that? Well, they would take what's called 0 hour for activities you could do at home. For example, you can't be in a band at home, right? Can't be a band of
Mm.
one kid. So they would go to they would do the band with the school. They would do like sports with the school, but everything else is done at home. So just in that, short time period, there was one of the teachers ended up, and all the students knew this was going on, and I'm sure other faculty knew too. He was in a relationship with like a 17-year-old student whose brother was also in the school, and that went on until he got accused and went to the newspaper. He got shuffled off to another school. Now this is in Washington State. He gets shuffled off to another school, and afterwards, and he leaves his wife and children. His kids are going to that same high school, by the way, and then marries this gal once she turns 18. Right? I mean, so that happened here, and that's not the only one. I mean, there's several cases like that around here. Like when my kids were going to school, they saw this stuff. So that's just my little neck of the world. It's rampant. And the thing that's crazy about it is that used to be the sort of thing, and my wife talks about when she was in school, there was a lot of that at her high school. What's I think one of the things that's changed, and this is really interesting, that used to be a male thing where the male teachers are taking advantage of female students. Now increasingly, it's the young women teachers who are doing it with the male students. So thank you, feminism, I think. That's another thing that's changed. So, oh yeah, you have definitely touched on something that's huge. And I think this is another thing that's related to this. I was trying to find the article and I couldn't find it. But there was an article, I can't remember what state, I think it's Nebraska. Did you catch this about Nebraska? So there's a Supreme Court of Nebraska case. So it's going to the Nebraska Supreme Court. It'll probably wind up in the Supreme Court, where they're saying that public school it's unconstitutional to require parents to be taxed for public school and not allow them to take their money and go pay for it somewhere else. And I've thought that from the beginning. It's like I'm paying for a school system I can't even use. So if you want to have compulsory education, that's fine. But then you don't get to dictate where I have that. You can't make me take my money and spend it someplace. You know, okay, cool. That means in the public school system as we know it, or at a minimum, force them to actually compete for the dollar. So what that would basically mean, if that were something like that were to win, it would mean school choice is now a national thing.
Yeah, yeah, of course. Well, I mean, anybody who anybody who is in favor of competition anywhere else would believe that the voucher system is valid. And we like cheap prices and we like comparison shopping. We go to Amazon, we go to Costco, we do whatever we can. We clip coupons in order to get to make sure that we're paying the best price for the best product. Education of all things. I mean, how much time do you spend searching for a car, and you only keep a car for 10 years, right? I mean, your education is the platform for your life.
Yeah.
So yeah, and I did actually find that article. Oh shoot, it was a combination between ProPublica. Oh boy, I just lost it. ProPublica and KQED. It's a joint investigation, and it was specifically California's teacher discipline system. They found that 67 educators kept their credentials despite districts documenting sexual harassment or misconduct against them. At least 14 of those were later rehired at other high schools.
Yeah.
And part
Mhm.
part of
How can that
well,
happen?
it says right here, part of the problem is that California's licensing agency can't formally act on allegations without a victim affidavit, and the state's disciplinary database doesn't publicly flag misconduct cases the way it does for doctors, nurses, and lawyers. So that
Yeah.
they refer to that kind of problem as passing the trash. So you've got a problem teacher right here, and rather than dealing with it, you just push them out to
The
another
thing I
district.
don't understand about that is you would think it'd be in the union's best interest to get rid of those people because they're causing a black eye. If that comes out, it's the whole thing that you got going could be like dismantled. I don't understand why is it in your interest to protect someone who's doing that stuff?
Well, if there's no visibility, if they are ensured that there is no visibility, then first of all, they're going to lose a dues paying member if these get pushed out. Second of all, if you sometimes, if you're transparent about an issue, people start to doubt your credibility. Now, that then becomes the responsibility of the agency or the union or whatever to manage that crisis and, get your PR team, on red alert, right? I mean, that you have to be, of course, we both agree that like you have to be willing to identify a problem and deal with the problem. Covering it up in the long term doesn't work, but it has been. I mean, to think that California teachers have more privacy and protection than doctors, nurses, and lawyers.
Well, and here's the reason I think part of this. So the liability, so a private organization would look at this and your liability insurance would be through the roof. If you're not doing this in a certain organization, for example, if you have something in place in organizations where you deal with children, then your insurance rate is going to be through the roof. So the insurance companies are basically saying, you got to put some kind of background check system or something in place, or your insurance is going to be 500% higher. And so they respond to that. I think because this is my guess, it's public funds. So if we get sued, we're not taking a hit. It's not like we're going to go out of business, right? This is yet another reason why this system needs competition. Because if it had competition and you were thinking about your kid being a liability for something like this and nobody's going to say anything, well, you had another choice. You'd go take the other choice, right? So it's yet another reason why you should be able to take your dollar to go. I think that customers, like every other, back in the 70s when Ford and GM were making these big giant tubs that were like getting 3 miles a gallon, they weren't going to change a thing until the Japanese came along and cleaned their clock. And only then did they retool and start making, and now they make fantastic cars. But boy, if you remember, and I'm a little older than you, but in the 70s and 80s, those things were like junk. They really were. I mean, they would fall apart all the time. And then Honda and Toyota came along and you drive the car 100,000 miles, put some oil in it, you're good to go. 30 miles a gallon, I'm in.
That's right.
That's right. My first 3 cars were all Hondas and Toyotas.
Yep. My first car was a Volvo, which is also an excellent car, but
right. Yeah. We just started making crap, and it took us till we got spanked real hard for like 20 years to finally figure it out and like respond to it. And this is funny because we remember that whole thing. They went to the government begging for like bailouts, trying to get the government to bail them out. Just every business will do that if they can, right?
And everybody got one except for Ford. I think Ford was the only one who didn't ask for it, right?
The only one of them was AMC, American Motor Company. About some I can't remember the name of the one. It was the Gremlin. Do you remember the Gremlin?
Yeah.
Oh man, appropriately named the Gremlin.
Yeah. Or do you
That
remember the
thing
Pinto?
was, oh yeah, the Pinto was another one. Yeah.
Yeah, that was
Those
that was
things.
not cute either. But
Woo!
and then the Pinto had problems where the engines were blowing up. Do you remember there was some issue where it was like, the engine was in the back and it was blowing up towards the passengers. It wasn't like at
Yeah.
least going.
So the deal
Yeah.
was if you rear-ended it, then it was more likely to explode. There was a massive lawsuits over that. Oh yeah, that was ugly. But
Yes.
and unfortunately, that's how it's funny how human beings are. Like I'll give you the perfect example of this. So there's a stop sign. We have like a busy street not too far from here. And before we moved here, there was no red light. And the neighborhood had been complaining, dangerous intersection, somebody's gonna get killed. Nothing, 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 nothing. Finally, somebody gets run over by a car, get killed. Presto, got a light. That's unfortunately how right. Priest around, and finally it breaks. Movies all kinds of protocols so that never happens again. And now it's by
Yeah.
far the safest place for a kid to be. The public schools haven't had that mea culpa yet, that moment where they just get depantsed, like the church did. But they're headed for it. No pun intended, by the
I
way.
yeah. I certainly hope so. I mean, um there was some news about the elementary school district where my kids went to school. There's this she's an assistant superintendent of like curriculum, and
Mhm.
she is just so far into the whole trans movement, LGBTQ plus plus plus. I mean, she's just, and I don't know what her connection. I don't know her to ask her, but I don't know why she is such an advocate for this population. But it goes above and beyond what is even. I mean, of course, none of it's appropriate, but she's pushing this agenda, and
Mhm.
so she was caught on tape. Somebody had recorded her uh, in a meeting, I think, with her staff, where she was explaining that they had set up communication channels and programming where, like processes, where they would, in name only, transition an elementary age child, because this district is
Mhm.
K6. So they would transition in name only these children
Mhm.
intentionally without informing parents.
Mhm.
And so these kids would be listed on rosters. They would, have their name, their new name on their test. They would be addressed by their classmates and by, teachers by this new name, and parents had
Mhm.
absolutely no idea. And
Yeah.
she was this was a policy that she was, naming and claiming.
Yeah. And see, here's the
These are the
thing.
kinds of people. These are the kinds of people that they're groomers, so to speak.
Mhm.
That she may not be personally doing anything physically to a child, but it's the warping of their brains.
Well, you have to understand this is a sick ideology, like of religious magnitude, and people like this. It's like they asked, I can't remember the famous bank robber, like, "Why do you rob the bank?" He says, "That's where the money is." It's the same thing.
Yeah.
These people, they grab, and their best product is the place to work. If you want to be a groomer, sexual molester, all those kinds, you're going to go to this where you have access to kids, and the parents are nowhere around. And built into this system for multiple generations is a system where we assume trust. You assume that adults who are watching your kids and teaching your kids have a moral code similar to yours. And that was true when I was a kid. It ain't true anymore. And I think America is increasingly waking up to this fact that when you turn your kid over to someone else, which is something we probably never should have done in the first place. I know I'm going to come across as an extremist on this, but I am. They are your kids. It's your duty to raise them with the proper moral code. And if you give them to somebody else for 8 hours a day, and that and you are essentially delegating your duty to someone else to do that, and then
Yeah.
that person not doing it, it's on you to fix it or to get them out of there or not put them there in the first place. And I would suggest to you that in a public school setting, you have no control over that. They can tell you whatever they want. You have no idea what's going on in that school, and your kid's not going to tell you because
Yeah.
that's how kids are wired. They're not saying anything,
Hmm.
um, and so yet another reason why the school choice needs to be because these people were raised in the same educational system. So the university system all supports it. So unless they have a unique situation where they didn't go to one of the handful of schools and colleges in the United States that doesn't support that stuff, this is what they're going to do. And you're turning your kid over to that. I can't tell you how many people I've talked to, by the way, who are like my age or older, who can't have conversations with their kids or grandchildren. They don't get together for dinner or Thanksgiving. They don't like each other, haven't spoken to each other in years. All that stuff precisely because they were taught to hate their parents. They were taught to hate their religion. They were taught to hate their country. Um, and it's hard to undo that.
Yeah. Yeah, it is. Well, education is the educational system is definitely a huge part of it. Social media is also a big part of it. All of this just craziness that you know there's an algorithm that will just feed you more of what it is that you ingest. You
Mhm.
spend too much time on one video of a certain theme, and next thing you know, your whole video is filled with
Or
yeah,
I
fishing,
see what yeah,
whatever.
I see it with what I look at right now. I'm not looking at crazy stuff, but it's kind of disturbing that this, for example, these stuff.
Yeah.
We call it on the physiology how it works. Now, right, but what if this was like porn, for example? Right, we all know what happens, or any other number of things, and that would not be cool. So it's funny. It's like any tool we get, it can be used for good or it can be used for bad. Just like
Yeah.
nuclear energy, right? We can blow ourselves to smithereens, or we can create energy that lasts forever, right? This wrench, I can fix my bicycle, or I can like beat your brains out with the wrench, right? And and that's where it comes back to that moral code again, right? We have got to inculcate people with the ability to reason, right and wrong, truth and lies, good and evil. And if we don't do that, it will come undone.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
which goes back to God, church, family, the basic unit where we form human beings. That's got to be intact, and it's got to be like flying right. Because if it's not, everything else will go to hell in a handbasket, which brings me back to this educational system. I actually think, arguably, the single most important thing we can do is fix that education system.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's going to be a huge task, but I think that's what Trump was trying to do by, defunding the DOE and, making states responsible. I'll send the money to you guys, and then you know, you're responsible for pushing it out, and you can't fund programs like this and like this and like this and like this. Um, so I know that there's a lot of people, and I'm not working in the schools in any meaningful way to know, but I know that there's schools that are complaining that just like healthcare facilities are complaining,
Mhm.
just like hospices are complaining, that Trump is doing all sorts of things because he's cracking down, and there's some people that are kind of getting smushed in the middle, you know,
Mhm.
but but yeah, kind of innocent people and that are going to be pushed anyway. Things will happen unintentionally as they start trying to shift direction and
Mhm.
restrict funding for certain things. But talking about social media, there's that big, Meta is back in court. They've been in court, seems like, for years. But there is a landmark trial that 4 states attorney generals are pursuing, and I was a little surprised at the states because they're mostly blue: California, Colorado,
Hmm.
Kentucky, and New Jersey.
Hmm.
They're, with the four of them, they're seeking up to $1.4 trillion in penalties and product changes
Hmm.
under consumer protection laws, alleging that Meta has knowingly um, sucked children in and caused them harm emotionally, mentally, and then, of course, leading many of them to physically harm themselves.
Hmm.
That they were warned over and over and over again, and it did not behoove them financially to follow any sort of these guardrails. And so they, every time their internal team would alert them to things, they would note it and then move in a different direction because it just
Hmm.
wasn't, it wasn't in their corporate profit model.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, without knowing much about it, I would tend to believe the people pursuing the suit just based on what we've seen over the last few years. I mean, they've done so much to destroy their credibility. It's hard for me to imagine. So I'm back to the days when I was a sales rep. And we used to call it ethical pharmaceuticals back then. That was literally ethical pharmaceuticals. So what are the unethical ones, you might ask? Well, now we know. But you would go into a doctor's office with a new product, and if you couldn't show, you know, double-blind, placebo-controlled, randomized trials, you know, from reputable places of that product, um, on both safety and efficacy, there was no way they were writing a prescription for it. It just wasn't going to happen. And even at that, a substantial percentage of them still wouldn't write it. I want to wait till my colleagues try it first to see what happens. I'm not going to be the first guy, right? And so to see them roll out these vaccines without any of that, and then without having liability, and then basically tell you, don't worry about it, we got this,
Yeah.
right? I'm still stunned that so many people did this. And I think there's a couple of reasons for this too that kind of fly under the radar. One of them is that was essentially a generation ago. So we're talking about 30 years ago. I think in the last 30 years, there's been the impact uh, of a decrease in the moral code, a decrease in church attendance, a decrease in all of those things has led to us producing citizens who have a relaxed moral code or a relaxed sense of duty to their fellow citizen. Because the Hippocratic Oath at one time would not have allowed you to do that. It was do no harm. And that oath has been modified, number
Yeah.
one. And number two, we have a lot of physicians who now operate, and I'm not beating up the entire profession, but in general, who they work more for the dollar than they do for the patient. And again, that wasn't the case 30 years ago. Number one. And number two, their patients aren't their customers anymore in the way that they used to be. If you go back to the old Dr. Marcus Welby days, there was nobody between you and that patient, right? The patient getting paid, that's all right. Bring me like 2 dozen eggs and we'll call it good, right? I mean, and probably, and this is probably still the case, it's underappreciated. Most physicians, about 30% of the work they do is like pro bono, right? That's
Hmm.
the way it used to be. They would just treat people for free. Don't worry, I got you, because people were in bad shape and I got you covered, right? The other patients like took care of it, and that was it. Well, now when you're run by these giant like mega corporations, you get your patients from a panel provided by them. You're responding. Your customer is the insurance company, not the patient.
Yeah.
So if the insurance company is getting paid a kickback to write, let's say hypertension drug A, then you're writing hypertension drug A for that patient. If hypertension drug A has more side effects than hypertension drug B, well, tough noogies, right? You're going to be trying A until you can't tolerate it anymore. And if you're around this thing enough, you will know that to be the case. And so those patients who either don't have an advocate or aren't educated enough to read package inserts and look at this stuff, um, they're going to get hosed in some cases fatally, in most cases not fatally. Just like you're going to be really experiencing a lot of discomfort and you're thinking it's just because of your age, when it's a drug you're taking,
Yeah.
and you could be taking a different drug that wouldn't have that side effect, but your doctor's not incentivized to go look at that for you.
Yeah. Yeah. Or the combination. There's I mean, yeah, this the lack of interest, the lack of curiosity that
Hmm.
doctors have about the whole person who's coming in to
Hmm.
see them. I personally am having some experience with that, where I'm going in because I'm having an issue that I think is related to this, but the doc isn't interested in exploring that avenue at all, just wants to, you know, go off of presenting symptoms. And it's like, well, okay, but what about this and what about that and what about this? You know, can we talk about the whole picture, please? You know, and how maybe, you know, there's some interaction going on with medications or with, you know, just other things. And it's like, oh no, no, no. They just want to deal with what is right here in front of me. And what is right here in front of me, like you said, could be a kickback to prescribe a certain medication. It could be, I simply don't have time to deal with all of your problems. And so I'm just going to prescribe you an SSRI. And so you'll be happy and you'll go away. Right?
Yeah. Yeah. And so check this out. Now, I'm not saying this is true everywhere, but I think it's true in lots of places. I'm going to not say the name of the specialty because I don't want to be right. But I used to call it a certain specialty, and I work with a consulting firm to the medical system. So for this particular specialty, so they have data that shows how many, the amount of money you want to make based on how many patients you need to see per hour. It's my granddaughter waving here. So you got to see, I think it was like 12 patients an hour to hit this certain number. I think for this particular specialty, it was like $600,000 a year, right? And that was the average for that specialty. And so you got to see like a patient. If you look at that, that's like a patient every 5 minutes, right? So you don't have time to sit and talk to grandma about what's her aches and pains and all that. She comes in, she got ABC, here's drug D, E, and F that works for that. Wham, bam, see you, ma'am. So you go into that office, and a resident, either a resident or a nurse practitioner or a PA comes in. They're the ones that spend time with you. The doctor comes in. He's read that he walking down the hall from one patient to the next. He's reading the chart. He walks in. Oh, biggity bada boom, bada bada bing. See you, baby, boom, and you're out. Right. That's why they got. It's like it's an assembly line, like a manufacturing plant.
Yeah.
If I don't see those 12 people an hour, then I'm not going to be able to make my nuts, sort of a thing, right? And if it's a low enough number, the insurance company's going to, other people are going to be angry with you, right?
Yeah.
So people don't realize that.
Yeah. No, I mean, I realize that. But I still don't forgive the doctors, you know?
Oh, and you shouldn't.
Like, but let's not forget the Hippocratic Oath, you know? So yeah, but that's why they always say that you have to be your advocate, because your healthcare provider doesn't really care.
Right.
But you care. So get involved, get informed, you know, and bring people with you. You know, when my dad was going in and asked, you know, he needed to get some surgery. And, you know, I went with him on one of his appointments, and I just took out my phone and I said, you don't mind if I record this, right, Doc? Because if he had a problem with it, I had a problem with him. And he said, of course not. No, of course not. So I said, well, you know, my mom and my brother, you know, we're all very concerned. So I just recorded the phone call, and then I sent it to everybody. And, you know, and then I was like, and Dad, this is great for you, because there's some things that you're going to think afterwards. Oh gosh, I wish that I had paid attention more to that, or I wish I had asked about that. And when you play it back, you know.
Yeah. Oh, it's a complicated field, and for most people, you're not going to be able to retain this stuff. I'll tell you one classic one, and then we probably, you know, getting to the top of the hour. So my dad had a triple bypass. This is like the late 80s, and I was in the cardiovascular arena when I was selling it, so I knew that area pretty cold. And I'll never forget, I'm sitting at the end of his bed, and I see his chart. So I can read his chart like a doctor could, right? And I could see there were certain things that were supposed to be done for someone with that, you know, that weren't done. And so I started asking the doctor, and I started talking in the language that they would immediately know I knew what I was talking about, right? So I wasn't using the brand names of the drugs. I was using the generic names of the drugs and talking about the mechanism of action of the drugs. And he immediately got defensive and sternly said, well, you have to get, you know, his signature before I can talk to you about this. I was like, fine, we can do that. I got his signature. And by the time I came back the next day, the chart was all changed for those things that I said, right? So you got to know, they don't work for the patient anymore. There's exceptions. Your job, your mission, should you choose to take it, is to find the exceptions. Mechanic.
Yeah.
with lots of stuff. Those things. Then you're running the risk that you're going to get snowed. And the only thing that's different about medicine, if your plumbing goes bad, it ain't going to kill you. You know, but if you're
Well, and
internal,
it also
but
yeah, it also just seems like the medical issues have become more and more complex, and more, things are interrelated. It's not it. There's so many things going on in our food and our environment that really snarl things up, and so you have to just be vigilant about keeping track of how you feel, and keeping track of what you're eating, and keeping track of just your health.
we got to get back to the immune system. What can we do to help our immune systems? That's God's great healer that takes care of it, right? So
Yeah.
less pills, more immune system. What are we putting in our body that will help our immune system or hurt our immune system?
Yeah.
And I think we can get back to that, folks. Yeah, people. I think the average American takes like 6 drugs. I mean, that's like insane, right? 6. That's just average.
Yeah, I take a lot of supplements, but not many drugs. At least not that any I'll talk about, but I'm just kidding.
Yeah. Can you? Arthritis, don't forget, and you got to deal with autism, and you got to deal with schizophrenia. Right? You got people walking around like 9, 10 drugs, right? And none of them are tested together. They're all tested in isolation, so you have no clue how they work.
Yeah.
How they work together. It's like insane. And then people go to the doctor with a whole bag of drugs. They've been to 3 or 4 different doctors, and the last doctor didn't know that the other doctor prescribed X, Y, Z. It is incredible that more people haven't dropped dead just from that, and a significant number have, but no one's.
I was going to say, there are lots of people dropping dead from a lot of that stuff, but it's just not really something that is talked about a whole lot.
But polypharmacy, that's what it's called, like polypharmacy, like just too many drugs.
Wow.
Well, anyway, and on that happy note,
yeah, this bad habit. We're like,
Nancy Reagan said, "Don't just say no." I still remember Nancy Reagan, just say no. All right. You audience, US.
You know what? I don't have any final words other than I promise that next week we'll end on a high note. This is a habit we need to break.
I like it.
Yeah.
That's what we do. All right. Well, everybody, peace out. See you next week.
Bye.
Good night. I think it ended. That end?